We do have a lot in common. The same earth, the same air, the same sky. Maybe if we focused on what's the same instead of what's different, well, who knows? This line rings so true to me and affects me on such a deep level because if more people actually acted with this mentality, misunderstandings and disagreements that cause hatred to spread from that could potentially be avoided. It's a fundamentally important line and uplifting mindset in all. And the character that says this all too deep philosophy is Meowth from the Pokemon anime. An anime that was ingrained so deeply into us from a young age. We were basically indoctrinated through Pokemon. And yes, one of the core character's core mindsets, despite the fact that he's generally a goofball, is to treat people for who they are. Now, Meowth's backstory altogether, even when I watched it for the first time long ago, always hit home with me. He was a poor Meowth, a wild Pokemon that didn't even have the food to eat, and when he was caught stealing from someone, they tied him up as punishment and hang him from a tree, where he managed to see on the big screen how a Meowth on television was eating delicacies. So he too wanted that lifestyle and moved to the big city so he can also get a gig in Hollywood. He was not so fortunate, however, and even when he found this girl, well, a female Meowth, she ended up telling him, "Nope, I have absolutely no interest with you. You're a filthy stray cat after all. I'd rather stay with the humans that feed me well." So Meowth, in love, hid in the attic of an enunciation lesson where he would hear human language, repeating phrases again and again and again, where he would try his hardest to learn human talk and stand upright like humans to impress the Goyle. He manages through a lot of hard work to do what no other Pokemon could do. He can actually speak through a hell of a lot of dedication. And when he got to a level he was confident with, he walked on his back legs up to this girl and spoke to her in human speak, hoping that she'd accept him, being that she likes humans so much, and she was disgusted by him and called him a freak. From that day forward, Meowth didn't feel welcome anywhere. He was no human and he was no Pokemon until he was taken in by a group of goofballs, Team Rocket, being that the first human word he learned was rocket, and ended up falling in love with Jessie and James. Yes, Jessie, James, and Meowth are three characters that I feel like every single person who likes anime are very familiar with. Their screen time is always the best part of every anime episode. When I'm watching epic gym battles of Ash fight the gym, I'm waiting for Team Rocket to dig a tunnel underground, try to steal Pikachu and get blown away somehow. That's the highlight. These guys are always there in the background, cheering Ash on in his hardest moments. My most touching moments are the Team Rocket moments, and they are my fondest memories of the Pokemon anime. And despite the fact that they're always fighting with each other, always arguing with each other, and always blaming each other, they're a family that loves each other dearly, as shown on many occasions. Meowth is not accepted by his fellow Pokemon because he's a freak that walks and talks like a human, and he's not accepted by humans, being that he's still a stray cat. He feels at home with Team Rocket, who sees him for who he is. And to re-quote his own phrase again, we do have a lot in common. The same earth, the same air, the same sky. Maybe if we focused on what's the same instead of what's different, well, who knows? Yeah, unfortunately we don't know. Through our really early stages in getting introduced to anime, one of the core themes pushed at us is to treat people for who they truly are. And it's something that other anime pick up, and something that I truly feel connected to. This is Pokemon. Remember that kids show that everyone loves to hate on for not being as good as the manga, with the million episodes of seeming nothingness, with the goofball Meowth and Team Rocket that shares more core values than your average person in this day and age? I mean, technically, they haven't even committed any crimes. It's not like they actually succeeded in stealing anything. So yeah, they're not exactly hailed as the greatest villains of all time. But one of the characters that is hailed in this way is Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. Now, the Chimera Ant arc in all explores the absolute depths of human psyche. That's one of the things that I think it's praised for most, and if it's not, then it should be. From the violent spasms of character development seen in both Gon and Meruem in parallel with one another, where Gon goes from human to monster and Meruem goes from monster to human. Meruem is absolutely one of the most terrifying anime villains of all time, and despite this, this, had one of the saddest deaths in all of anime. Being that I don't want to spoil, I will not tell you exactly how that goes down, even though all of you should really have watched Hunter x Hunter already. And no, telling you that he dies isn't really a spoiler because he's an anime villain and most villains die. But Meruem was born to be this ruthless killing machine and the king of the world. Not only that, but he was prompted by the only people he could call friends to continue killing, conquering, and being the king of the world. Yeah, who'd have thought being king of the world kinda sucks? Being that that's all he knows and that seems to be all he's good at, that's what his mission statement seems to be. That is, until he meets Komugi, someone who's better than him at something. Meruem has ultimate power and ultimate intelligence, yet despite this, he seems to keep losing to this blind girl at some kind of anime chess. And while in the beginning it frustrates him, as time moves on, he begins to really respect Komugi and actually love her. She is someone who, as I've mentioned, is blind and doesn't realize she's playing against some sort of mutant ant monster, and she actually falls in love with him as well. It seems kinda corny, but Meruem is only happy when he's with her, despite the fact that chilling with this little woman is not exactly the dictionary's definition of world domination, which is what he thought he was programmed to do. He ended up realizing too late, and it ended up costing him his life, but because of how he was born, he was prodded in a direction that just wasn't him. He never realized that he had his own individuality, not just what the grand plan stated for him to do because of the circumstances of his creation. He only realized at the very end of his life that the life that he had lived was not his own, but other people's perception of what his life should be. He died happily realizing who he was. When he first met the royal guards, he said to them, "What's my name?" And he got 3 different answers. Pito said, "Whatever you want it to be." Yuppie said, "It's not my place to tell you." And Shiapoof said, "You have no name other than the king." Alexander, another YouTuber who does dope Hunter x Hunter analyses, used this to categorize the personalities of the 3 guards, and he did a great job at that. But in the end of the day, this is a far more powerful message in regard to Meruem, in my personal take. Meruem, from the very beginning, wanted to know his name. He didn't want to be called king. King is a role. Name is an individual. From the very beginning, he wanted his individuality, and he only found it at the time of his demise. Meruem, for this, among many other reasons, is one of my favorite anime villains of all time, and despite that, there's another scene in the Chimera Ant arc that tackles the power of individuality, and it's probably one of the saddest scenes in the entire series, despite the fact that I've never seen anyone else mention it. But the Chimera Ants are created by the queen ingesting other living organisms and giving birth to these creepy monster thingos, and the Chimera Ants got more and more sophisticated as the queen would eat stronger and more intelligent life, breeding the next generation of ants to be even more powerful. Some of the first humans that were eaten by this queen are 2 kids that lived in some poor town, a brother and a sister. And as Chimera Ants, many of the ants reclaimed their memories from their past life before they were actually eaten by the queen, and one of them that remembered was this girl. In the Chimera Ant arc, at the very end, after all the fighting subsided, this girl went home to the farm that she was raised and peeked into the house that she used to live in to see her mother completely heartbroken and crying. This mother lost her 2 children to these monsters, and her life was not the same. But the moment she saw this mutated ant creature staring at her from the doorway, she immediately realized it was her daughter. She ran up to her and gave her a hug, crying in happiness that she was reunited with one of her children, and the entire town immediately accepted this deformed ant monster that formerly terrorized them as one of their own. They accepted her for who she was immediately, without second guessing or questioning it, because it didn't matter what she looked like, it mattered who she was. Matching and contrasting a really powerful theme of the king himself in this tiny microcosmal moment that hits me to my core every time I see it. Speaking of characterization due to physical outwardness, in My Hero Academia, we had a very interesting character introduced in the tournament arc by the name of Shinso. He was in class 1C because he did not make it to the major hero courses due to the fact that his quirk doesn't work on robots and the entrance exam was really dumb. No offense, Principal Muskrat, that's my personal take. Shinso has the power that anyone that answers one of his questions is under his mind control, which is ridiculously strong, but most people immediately notice when hearing about his quirk that this guy's a scary dude. In fact, he had it mentioned to him several times that this is a quirk that would fit a villain better than a hero. Despite the fact that he wanted to be a hero with all his heart, it didn't matter because the public perception of him, just due to the fact that he was born born with this quirky nature, he was treated differently and mentally ostracized by his peers. In My Hero Academia, I believe discrimination is a pretty massive theme, being that we see almost every fully deformed character in the series to be a villain. In fact, in the provincial license exams, their final opponent was Gang Orca, the formerly number 10 hero. But you know why they chose Gang Orca as opposed to anyone else? Because he was the hero that looked most like a villain. Again, nodding to the pre-cursed mentality that people have in looking at others. Because of the quirk he was born with, he's the hero that looks most like a villain. I'm pretty sure it's not his fault he was born that way, but it didn't matter, because that's the perception of society. It's a perception that has to change, and it's a perception that Spinner, that certain member of the League of Villains, was talking about in the latest chapter, that he was picked on his entire youth just due to his lizard-like appearance. Shinso doesn't have any outward disformations, which I guess definitely helps, but just because his quirk is better suited to be a villain's quirk, because these people read comics about this type of power-up, and it seems like it would fit a villain better, this character is gonna be ostracized by everyone? Well, he does surprisingly well in the tournament arc for anyone from Class 1C, and he definitely makes a mark, being that manga stuff happens later that I won't spoil for the anime onlys. That still said though, I was rooting for him when he was fighting Deku. He was the real underdog. In the end of the day, Deku was in Class 1A, and Shinso was in Class 1C. As I'm sure all of you are aware, Deku beat Shinso, crushing his dreams, unknowing that a second chance would actually run him by in the manga. And to add insult to injury, Deku had to use hacks to win. He couldn't even win normally. Now, the reason why I chose Shinso to be my main topic of discussion, not Gang Orca, not Spinner, not any other villain, is because Shinso fooled every single viewer. Shinso did his job so damn well. Everyone watching the series as it was airing, especially with every episode first introducing Shinso to be upset at Class 1A, telling them to look out and watch their backs, to future episodes of him mind-controlling members of the class we know and love to do his bidding, helping him make headway in the tournament. We hated this character more and more. I don't think anyone hated him as a character, we just found him relatively interesting, but almost everyone regarded him as someone somewhat sinister. And then in his fight with Deku, as the fight was nearing its close and Deku just pushed him out of the arena, and he said, "I want to be a hero too. You don't understand what I had to go." And we see his very slight and brief backstory as how every single character in the world of My Hero Academia looked at him the same way we looked at him this entire season so far, due to his quirk and demeanor, and the fact that he had to play dirty if he expected to win. I mean, if he just pasted on his forehead, "If you answer my question, I will mind control you," most people will not be answering his questions. He has to play dirty due to his very nature. Now, he can play dirty for justice, just like he can play dirty for evil, but that's not how most people see it. That's not how most people in the world of My Hero Academia see it, and that's not how most of the viewers saw it either. His theme hit hard and hit home, because it hit the viewers the same way it hit the other characters in his world. Doesn't matter what his quirk is, or how it's used, it matters what's inside the guy, and that's the really heavy-hitting message that Shinso was trying to hit home, because Shinso had the heart of a hero. And granted, it was a long-about way that the anime went to teach that to us, but it did. By the end of the tournament arc, I saw Shinso for who he is, not what his quirk was. And even though I give a lot of crap to the latest manga arc of My Hero Academia where Shinso reemerged, I'm really glad Shinso reemerged. And speaking of characters showing up in the tournament arc, Black Clover did a hell of a job with that as well, because they introduced Zora. Zora, in case you don't know, is this lovely-looking masked fellow who doesn't look like he'd harm a pussycat. And Zora is one of my favorite anime characters ever. His thematic relevance in the tournament arc of Black Clover is far different than Shinso's in My Hero Academia. He enters the tournament under a different name, just to annoy the noble families that are controlling the Clover Kingdom, because this guy's father was the first non-noble to become a magic knight, and he was mysteriously killed. Rumors spread that he was actually killed by nobles that didn't feel like he was worthy to be one of them. So this guy basically made it his life's work to piss off noble knights, which granted, not exactly the absolute utmost noble goal, but at the same time, his pain was very felt. The way Black Clover works is the nobles are of the utmost value in the eyes of society. Second are the people with large mana pools that still, even though they're not nobles, they could still kind of sort of make a name for themselves in the Magic Knights, even though that is very difficult. Zora is someone who was born as a commoner and also born without a large mana pool, but he ends up using brain and wit to make his trap magic as effective as possible, and he's quite the badass as well. He ends up paired up in the same team as Asta in this tournament, which was set up in a fashion to make the teams totally random between all the separate Magic Knight guilds, and Asta and him did not get along at all. He was willing to cheat, setting traps on the battlefield weeks before the actual fights to give him a leg up, and Asta only wanted to play by the rules. You see, Asta and Zora came from very different angles in how they attacked this nobility issue. Asta, who's a way more straight-hearted individual, said, okay, they're nobles, I'm not, I'll take them head on and I'll become the Magic Emperor, forever shattering this guise of a value in nobility over the Commonwealth. And Zora was not quite as idealistic, and his plan was to just tear it down. Every time he would win a fight, he would taunt at the enemies at all the reasons that caused their failure, the different flaws in their character, and he would poke fun at them, jeering at them for the reasoning that even though they were born to noble families, they didn't manage to win against a bunch of commoners. Now, Zora's an asshole character, and that may be why I like him, as I find myself drawn to most asshole characters.
Wonder what that says about me.
But I bring this up because in Black Clover, where a massive theme is treat me for who I am, where the Black Bulls are the main characters guild, and every single person in the Black Bulls either comes from common birth or comes from noble birth, but was excommunicated from nobility, either because they didn't hold up to the family name or because they didn't have control over their mana. The Black Bulls guild is literally the black sheep of the Magic Knight guilds. Despite this, they stay strong and kick ass, and they really make a name for themselves. They lull you very much into the understanding that you gotta treat every individual for who they are, because that's Yami's philosophy in how he gathers his guildmates. He's willing to take anyone that'll try their hardest to push past their limits, because to him, it doesn't matter what you are, it matters what you do with what you are. As Fuegoleon said earlier in the series, being weak is nothing to be ashamed of, staying weak is, and anyone has the power to change. The reason why I bring Zora up more than the actual Black Bulls guild is because we never really see it from the other perspective. We never see the flaw on the minority side, because when Zora actually loses drawing to the enemy team, granted of nobles, he goes on his jeering monologue how every single character had terrible flaws and that's what caused their defeat, and then at the end he turns around and as he's walking away he says to himself, and Zora, it's your fault because you didn't trust in your friends. A character that was so wronged by society due to the very treatment of his father, to the very treatment of himself. And through meeting Asta and entering this tournament arc and being all sorts of badass, yes, his points against the other magic guilds are very valid. His points against nobility are very valid. But that doesn't change the fact that he himself is not always in the right either. He recognizes his mistakes and he changes from them. He becomes a very epic character in the aftermath of the war arc as well, because by hating nobility due to the system in place, it makes you no different than the nobility that's hating the commoners due to the system in place. In the end of the day, you're not treating anyone for who they are, you're just treating them for where they are in society's standards. As I've mentioned, this is a core theme to all of Black Clover, but I feel like Zora encapsulates it the best as far as an individual character. It's a basic mentality that everyone really should have, but is really nicely spelled out in anime. It's one of the things I greatly appreciate about it, especially in shonen, where it's a prevalent theme in various separate shonens rearing their heads in various separate ways. For example, Haikyuu. Haikyuu is an anime about volleyball. The main character of Haikyuu, Hinata, is a really short dude. He's a guy that under normal circumstances would have no place on a volleyball team just due to the fact that he was born the way he was. Through a hell of a lot of training and dreaming, this guy can jump really high, and he ends up scoring a spot on the Karasuno volleyball team, despite the fact that hopes for him are low just due to the fact that his physique does not match the sport he's playing. That's not gonna be enough of a reason for him to stop trying, and he doesn't stop trying. Due to this height disadvantage, though, no one treats him like a valid player of the sport, just at first glance alone. While that's completely understandable, and sizing up your opponents totally makes sense, the amount of sweat and tears this guy puts into training makes up for that in spades. He's not gonna let the world walk all over him just because the fact that he was born the way he was should dictate his entire life. No, this guy is in it to win it, and he's not gonna hear anything else. My favorite moment in all of Haikyuu that's not an actual match is when the team that's the strongest in in the prefecture. Shiratorizawa is having a training regimen, and Karasuno goes to visit them, with Hinata and Kageyama, the two main characters, talking to Ushijima, the ace of the greatest team in Japan. This guy has absolutely everything that Hinata doesn't. And to top it all, he works hard too. Ushijima feels to Hinata like an unstoppable force. This guy is basically undefeated, and his spikes are terrifying on a bone-shattering level. He's warned before even entering the actual tournament that they will lose if they go up against Shiratorizawa due to the severe, overpowering aspect to just this one player alone. And Ushijima knows how powerful he is. He doesn't need other people to tell him that he's a genius by his own right. So when he sees little Hinata facing him, telling him that he will defeat him, it's a threat that he could not take on a credible level just due to the appearance that Hinata showed. Ushijima's not a bad guy per se. He's just the emperor of his very own sport, and he feels like he's challenged by a peasant. When the ball comes flying out of the gym at Ushijima's face and Uchijima's about to catch it, from many meters away, Hinata sprints towards him, jumps, and catches the ball at Ushijima's face level, declaring a proclamation of war that don't look down on me. I will defeat you. Now, the match between Karasuno and Shiratorizawa only takes place in the third season, and that best of 5 match is the entire third season, where hype was through the roof the entire time. It was 10 episodes of extreme backs and forths, where thematically the entire opposing team was the ultimate weakness to Karasuno, specifically Hinata. The coach of Shiratorizawa was a guy who vehemently believed in physical might. This guy took the utmost peak specimens of students and turned them into monsters. He cultivated an ultimate team of volleyball players that, down to their very physiology, are perfect candidates to become pros. The life choices that this coach made until this point was that he was a character who also wanted to play volleyball. But he was short, and he was told that nothing would amount of this dream of his. He realized that, nope, I was born with the disability to be a champion at this sport, and he therefore decided he would coach the strongest team as opposed to become the strongest player. So going up against someone like Karasuno, someone like Hinata, character that doesn't care what other people tells him, he is and he will be the very peak of what he wants to be. It doesn't matter what people say, they will not wake him up from his dreams. He'll wake up when he feels like it's ready. He'll push himself to the utmost despite the world yelling at him otherwise, and he is the most powerful opponent for a coach like this who dropped his dreams due to the same reason that Hinata fights further. Granted, no single member of Karasuno is as powerful as Ushijima is on Shiratorizawa. Granted, the individual members on Karasuno are still weaker than the average members from the entirety of Shiratorizawa. The entire team is monsters. It's not just this one ace. The metaphor for Karasuno is a flock of crows, and the metaphor for Shiratorizawa is an eagle. Despite this, they put up a good fight. A good enough fight for the coach of Shiratorizawa to admit metaphorical defeat to Hinata personally. Hinata's a character where the world was against him, but none of that got to him. He didn't care how he was perceived. He only cared about pushing forward. He didn't like that people looked at him a certain way just due to his physiology, and he decided to change their minds personally. I'm not going to spoil the end of the third season. I highly encourage everyone to watch Haikyuu, being that it's one of my favorite anime, but the ending to the third season shook me to my core. Not going to tell you as whether they won or lost, because either way, that result would be devastating to me. The fact that despite all odds, they got to where they got, fighting against this peak team, aligning their mismatched abilities to be valid competitors in a competition where Hinata can actually spread his wings and fly, where no matter what you think and what your ideals are, you have no choice but to accept him as an incredible volleyball player. I know it's anime and it's sad to get mushy over watching volleyball. I mean, it's not even real volleyball. It's all scripted, but that's the beauty. It doesn't matter because the highs and lows of this stupid sports anime encapsulate the highs and lows of any battle anime or fantasy manga. It doesn't matter. The themes are the same and in fact stronger in many aspects. The Karasuno team became a freaking family, pushing towards their ultimate goal despite the odds being against them, where Hinata jumped up in front of Ushijima and caught the ball flying towards his face, where despite the fact that he is the physiological opposite of the peak specimen of Ushijima, he'll declare war on equal footing. And by the end of the third season, people don't need to think about whether they made their mind up or not to accept Hinata, because Hinata forced them. to recognize him. He forced them through his actions to perceive him as someone worthy of respect. Now, I'm glad I've gotten the chance to talk about many different characters in many different situations that exude similar themes, but I would like to talk about one more. And this would be a focus on a fight scene. It would be on Luffy versus Katakuri from One Piece. For those of you who don't know about One Piece, you're kind of lucky that you have a lot of reading to do, and it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun because One Piece is dope. But one thing that I respect about Luffy to his utmost is the fact that he regards everyone on an equal playing field. It doesn't matter if you're the utmost of nobility in a celestial dragon, he will clobber you if he feels like you deserve it. But despite this, the way the government itself treats different groups of characters makes absolutely no difference to Luffy. The reason why Boa Hancock became a warlord altogether is because she lived on her island of Whammon, and to protect this island of Whammon, she felt like she needed to join the government. When Luffy washed up to this island of Whammon, he didn't view any of them in a sexual light at all, because if he would have, then Boa's devil fruit would have turned him to stone. So we know he didn't. Perhaps it's because his schlong is made of rubber, but perhaps it's also because Luffy regards every single character for who they individually are, not how their greater race or sex should be regarded. He treats the fishmen like any other person, despite the fact that, granted, they are sold in auctions by the world government. They're treated as lesser beings by the very society that the world is using to progress. If the fishman is doing a bad thing like Arlong, Luffy will not hesitate to destroy them, and if the fishman is seemingly a good dude like Jinbei, Luffy will happily befriend them. Funny coincidence that Boa Hancock and Jinbei are two of my favorite characters in One Piece. But the point is, two things Luffy absolutely does not care about in the entirety of One Piece as going themes is A, what society deems anyone else. He'll look at everyone as their own individual, and B, he doesn't care what anyone else thinks about him. He doesn't mind looking like a quote-unquote fool in front of others, and he doesn't mind just being himself in whatever the situation may be. Now, his opponent in this fight I'm discussing, Katakuri, sees the world in a very different light. For him, at least the way he was nurtured, he sees things in a perspective where perception matters just as much, if not more, than reality. Luffy's focused on the reality of every situation. If you're a good person, he'll like you. If you're a good fishman, he'll like you. And he has absolutely no qualms about being himself. Katakuri, from a very young age, learnt that he was born with this weird mouth deformation where he has like fangs and stuff, and he was made fun of for it, and it closed him off mentally to how the world regarded him. He decided that the correct path to take would be to alter the world's perception of him. The guy wore a scarf around his mouth so that no one would see who he truly was, and he adorned himself with this air of dignity. No one in the world would see him eat because it's disrespectful. No one would ever see him sit down or lie on the floor because the ground is beneath him. He realized that in order for people to respect him and garner him with the respect he deserves, he needs to mask reality and change the world's perception of who he truly is. He is not how the world perceives him, but despite this, he realizes that this is his only way to make headway. This is how he's brought up. He's brought up looking down at people that aren't from the Charlotte family. He wants respect from his brothers and sisters, and they give him all so much respect due to his sheer stoic badassery and the esteem he holds himself in. When this facade is broken during his fight with Luffy, however, his sisters and brothers that formerly looked up to him jeered at him. They made fun of him. It was all too easy for them to change their entire mind of his being with this simple altercation of who he was. This could never happen with Luffy. Luffy is someone who is always straightforward with his crew and honest sometimes to a fault. He's a character that the world's perception of him cannot be broken because he never made any moves to hide who he really was. In his fight with Katakuri, a fight where he was clearly up against an opponent far stronger than he was, he still managed to win because he still got up and had the willpower to continue pushing himself to his utmost limit, standing up as many times as it would take to continue fighting. And Katakuri, who in the beginning was hitting him even while he was down due to the fact that he needed to defeat him, it became a very ideological battle between the two of them. They have very similar devil fruit powers, except Katakuri mastered all of them to a higher extent. They have the same fruit, the same haki, and the only major differences between them is this ideology that's a complete contrast between the two of them. That's why the first time Katakuri was knocked down, he did not have the resolve to stand up again. So without a shadow of a doubt in my mind that Katakuri was a stronger fighter than Luffy. That's that's not really up for debate. The point was, Luffy had people that believed in him for who he was, and Katakuri had people that respected him for what he wasn't. And it was this cataclysmic difference that caused his ultimate defeat. And at the time of his defeat, he even urged Luffy forward. He said, "You will be able to beat Big Mom, and you have the chance to become Pirate King." And Katakuri's personal character arc is one of my favorite in One Piece, and that's probably why he's in my top 3 characters in the entire story. Again, I'm not talking about him for the character he is, how really he was in the right in the whole Cake Island arc. Luffy invaded his homeland. He was defending his family. But despite all that, his family meant less to him than Luffy's crew meant to him. Because in the end of the day, Luffy versus Katakuri was an ideological conflict between being yourself at the cost of other people's perspective of you, or winning the respect of your peers at the cost of being yourself. And the victor was the former. And that's why I really appreciate anime. That's why this is some of the greatest that anime has to offer, and that's why it's going in my playlist of the greatest anime has to offer. Please do subscribe if you like this video or this series that I'm really enjoying making, because whether it's Meowth, a talking cat that only finds shelter with a group of wacky villain characters, but that's the only place he feels at home, because despite the fact that Jesse and James are literal antagonists of the Pokemon story, they respect Meowth for who he is on a greater level than the so-called greatness of society. Whether it's a character like Shinso, who's treated poorly just due to the fact that he was born with this genetic power that would be more suited for a villain than a hero, but he doesn't give up and he still pushes forward, trying to achieve his dreams of becoming a hero. Whether it's Meruem, this ultimate force of evil, who realizes more than world domination or any of that, he just wants to live a normal life. In the end of the day, he wants to be Meruem, not a king. Whether it's Zora, a character who's been burnt by the nobility system and harbors a massive hatred towards it, and a hatred rightfully targeted, but despite this, still realizes that he himself has his own individual flaws in regards to how he treats others in the same way this crooked society does. Whether it's surpassing expectations in Haikyuu, where Hinata can jump up and catch the ball before reaching an ultimate adversary, declaring war on even footing, where he has to force the world to get on their knees and respect him. Or whether it's the opposing journeys of Luffy and Katakuri that ultimately clash, proving Luffy's ideology is the superior. In this stupid two-dimensional world of anime, I feel more at home and appreciated than in the norms of everyday life and society. How this theme is tackled from the most childish anime like Pokemon to the most widely accepted anime like One Piece and My Hero Academia, to the depths of psychological anime like the Chimera Ant arc in Hunter x Hunter. Anime treats you for who you are.